The Department of Justice is officially empty, or at least the parts of it that matter most for the rule of law are now echoing with the silence of 3,000 empty desks. You've probably seen the headlines flashing across your screens all morning, screaming about chaos in the courts and criminals potentially walking free. But I want you to look past the immediate panic and understand the structural earthquake that just happened beneath our feet. This isn't just a story about a labor dispute or a political disagreement. This is the moment where the machinery of the state explicitly refused to become a mechanism of personal vengeance, and the economic and institutional consequences of that refusal are going to ripple through your life in ways you might not expect. We are witnessing a fundamental clash between the concept of public service and the demand for personal loyalty. The outcome of this clash will determine whether we live in a country governed by laws or one governed by the whims of a single leader. When you think of the Department of Justice, you might picture a grand building in Washington or the local federal courthouse in your city. But what you're really seeing is the invisible infrastructure that makes a modern economy and a free society possible. It's the guarantee that contracts will be enforced, that fraud will be punished, and that the rules of the game apply to everyone, from the mechanic down the street to the billionaire in the penthouse. What happened late last night was an attempt to strip mine that infrastructure and turn it into a weapon. Reports confirm that Donald Trump issued a classified order demanding the immediate arrest of 3 prominent political opponents. There was no grand jury indictment, no evidence presented, and no probable cause, just a direct command from the executive to the judiciary's enforcement arm to lock up his enemies. In a healthy system, or even a barely functioning one, there are layers of insulation designed to prevent exactly this kind of abuse. We have career prosecutors, civil servants who have sworn an oath not to a man, but to the Constitution. These are the people who analyze evidence, draft briefs, and argue cases based on statutes and legal precedents. They are the immune system of the body politic, designed to reject unlawful orders. And last night, that immune system kicked in. When those 3,000 lawyers refused the order, citing it as illegal and unconstitutional, they were doing exactly what their job description demands. But the response they got, a threat of immediate termination, reveals a shift in the very nature of our government. By resigning en masse rather than carrying out an illegal order, these prosecutors have effectively engaged in a wildcat strike for the rule of law. I want you to pause and think about what this actually means for you. You might be sitting there thinking this is just high-level political theater, the kind of drama that happens in D.C. and stays in D.C. But that's a dangerous mistake. The Department of Justice doesn't just handle high-profile political cases. It handles antitrust enforcement, ensuring that monopolies don't price gouge you at the grocery store. It handles environmental crimes, ensuring that companies don't dump toxic sludge into the water your children drink. It handles civil rights violations, ensuring that you're not discriminated against by your employer or your bank. When 3,000 of the most experienced, principled lawyers in that department walk out the door, that entire protective layer vanishes. The chaos in the courthouses today, the paused trials, the delayed hearings, is just the tip of the iceberg. The real danger is the vacuum they leave behind and, more importantly, who is going to fill it. We need to talk about the economics of loyalty. In a functional capitalist democracy, or at least one that aspires to be fair, success is supposed to be determined by competence, innovation, and adherence to the law. But in the system being constructed before our eyes, the currency is shifting from competence to loyalty. When you purge the experts who say no, because the law requires it, you inevitably replace them with sycophants who say yes, because their career depends on it. This isn't just bad for justice, it's catastrophic for the economy. Imagine trying to run a small business in a country where the law isn't written in a book, but decided on the fly based on who is friends with the leader. Imagine trying to get a loan or sign a contract when you can't be sure that a court will uphold it if the other party happens to be a political favorite. That's the world we're stepping into. This mass resignation is a signal flare. It's telling us that the safeguards we thought were made of concrete are actually made of people. Institutions aren't magic buildings that run themselves, they're collections of human beings making choices. When those human beings decide that the cost of participation is too high, the institution collapses. We've seen this pattern before in history and in other economies that slid into authoritarianism. The first step is always the politicization of the justice system. Once you control who gets prosecuted and who gets a pass, you control everything. You control the markets, you control the media, and you control the opposition. The immediate trigger here was a specific illegal order to arrest political opponents. But the pressure has been building for a long time. This wasn't a spontaneous event. It was the breaking point of a system that's been stressed to its absolute limit. For years, we've seen the gradual erosion of norms, the subtle hints that loyalty matters more than legality, and the slow creep of partisan politics into the impartial administration of justice. These lawyers didn't just wake up yesterday and decide to quit. They've likely been holding the line for months, pushing back against smaller encroachments, trying to keep the ship steady while the captain tries to steer it into the rocks. Last night, they simply ran out of room to maneuver. Think about the sheer logistical magnitude of what just happened. 3,000 highly trained professionals don't coordinate a move like this without a deep shared sense of crisis. This was a collective action problem solved by the sheer undeniable reality of the threat. In economics, we talk about tipping points, the moment when a slow change suddenly accelerates into a rapid, irreversible shift. This resignation is a tipping point for the American legal system. It signals to every other civil servant, every judge, and every regulatory official that the time for quiet resistance is over, and the time for open confrontation has arrived. The resignation letter that's currently going viral is a testament to this shift. It doesn't read like a standard bureaucratic departure notice. It reads like an indictment. It lays out in clear and devastating terms exactly why these lawyers could no longer serve. They're telling us that the Justice Department is no longer in the business of justice. And if the Department of Justice isn't doing justice, then what is it doing? It's becoming an enforcement arm for a political faction. It's becoming a tool for intimidation. For you, this leaves the federal government in a state of paralysis. You can't just hire 3,000 federal prosecutors off the street. These are specialized roles that require years of experience and security clearances. Replacing them with loyalists, as the reports suggest is the plan, means filling the ranks with unqualified ideological actors who are there to execute orders, not to uphold the law. This is the transformation of the state from a public trust into a private weapon. And when the state becomes a private weapon, the first casualties are always the people who don't have the power or the money to fight back. That means you. If you're a worker relying on labor laws to protect your safety, who will enforce them now? If you're a consumer relying on protections against fraud, who will prosecute the scammers? The vacancies at the DOJ create an open season for corporate malfeasance and white-collar crime. While everyone is focused on the political arrests, the bad actors in the economy are looking at this situation and licking their chops. They know that with the watchdog gone, they can get away with anything. This is the hidden cost of the crisis. It's not just about the high drama of political arrests. It's about the quiet erosion of the protections that keep your daily life safe and predictable. The narrative you're going to hear from the administration is that these lawyers were part of the deep state, that they were obstructionists, preventing the president from doing his job. You have to be smart enough to see through that. Resigning because you refuse to violate the Constitution isn't obstruction. It's the ultimate act of patriotism. It's the refusal to be complicit in the dismantling of the Republic. But the scary part is that their resignation, while noble, leaves the door wide open. By leaving, they've removed the last obstacle. The road is now clear for the administration to do exactly what it wanted to do in the first place, but without anyone there to say no. This brings us to the core of the issue, the fragility of our system. We often assume that because the United States is a wealthy, advanced democracy, we're immune to the kind of institutional collapse we see in failing states. But institutions are fragile. They depend on the consent of the governed and the integrity of the governors. When both of those are withdrawn, the collapse can happen with terrifying speed. We're watching the dissolving of the glue that holds society together. And we're going to have to grapple with the question of what comes next. How do you rebuild a justice system from scratch? How do you restore trust in the law when the law has been turned into a farce? These aren't abstract questions for political science seminars. These are the questions that will define the stability of your community and the security of your future. We are in uncharted territory, and the map we used to rely on has just been torn up. As we move forward, we need to look closely at the specific mechanisms that allowed this to happen and the individuals who are driving this train toward the cliff. We need to understand not just the what, but the how and the why. Because only by understanding the mechanics of this power grab can we hope to find a way to stop it. To understand how we arrived at this moment of total institutional rupture, we have to look at the mechanics of the executive power that has been expanding for decades, waiting for someone bold enough or reckless enough to use it fully. This crisis didn't start with a tweet or a press conference. It started in the fine print of legal theories that have been circulating in conservative think tanks for years. The core concept here is something called the unitary executive theory, which sounds dry and academic, but in practice is the legal argument for elected monarchy. It essentially claims that the president has absolute, unchecked control over the entire executive branch, including who gets prosecuted and who gets investigated. In this worldview, the Department of Justice isn't an independent body meant to serve the law. It's a franchise owned by the president, and the attorneys working there are merely his employees, expected to do his bidding as if they were working for his private real estate company. What we saw last night was the weaponization of that theory. When the order came down to arrest those political opponents, it was a test. The administration knew it was illegal. They knew there was no probable cause. That was the point. They were forcing a choice on every single prosecutor in the building. Choose the law or choose the leader. By resigning, those 3,000 lawyers refused to play the game. But in doing so, they inadvertently triggered the second phase of the plan, which is the replacement strategy. You might be wondering how the government plans to function without its top legal minds. The answer lies in a loophole-ridden statute known as the Federal Vacancies Reform Act and the aggressive use of acting officials. The plan isn't to hire qualified replacements who would require Senate confirmation and public vetting. The plan is to install temporary loyalists, people who've been vetted not for their legal acumen, but for their willingness to say yes. This is where the economic reality hits home for you. When you replace independent public servants with political operatives, you change the fundamental incentive structure of the economy.nd higher costs for imported goods. Your grocery bill, your gas prices, they all go up. Moreover, the stock market thrives on predictability. With a politicized DOJ, uncertainty skyrockets, causing volatility that wipes out retirement savings overnight. We've already seen initial dips in major indices this morning as investors digest the news. But perhaps the most insidious impact is on innovation and entrepreneurship. In a rule of law society, startups can challenge incumbents because they know the playing field is level. But when loyalty trumps merit, only those with political favor succeed. This stifles growth, leading to stagnation similar to what we've seen in corrupt economies around the world. Jobs dry up, wages stagnate, and the middle class shrinks. This isn't hyperbole, it's the logical endpoint of the path we're on. We must also examine the role of the media in this unfolding drama. Certain outlets, aligned with the administration, are already framing the resignations as a necessary purge of partisan hacks. This propaganda machine normalizes the abnormal, convincing the public that up is down, and illegal orders are just tough leadership. Without a free press challenging these narratives, the slide accelerates. And with the DOJ potentially targeting journalists, that freedom is under direct threat. Finally, consider the human element. These 3,000 lawyers aren't just statistics. They're families facing uncertainty, mortgages to pay, and careers derailed for standing on principle. Their sacrifice highlights the personal cost of defending democracy. But it also inspires, showing that resistance is possible, even in the face of overwhelming pressure. As we transition to the broader implications, remember, this crisis is a test of our collective will. Will we allow the foundations to crumble, or will we demand accountability? To grasp the full scope, we need to delve into the historical precedents that echo this moment. Throughout history, the corruption of justice systems has preceded the fall of republics. In ancient Rome, the politicization of the praetors led to the end of the republic and the rise of emperors. In more modern times, we've seen it in Weimar Germany, where the judiciary's independence was eroded, paving the way for totalitarianism. The U.S. has prided itself on avoiding such pitfalls through checks and balances, but those mechanisms are only as strong as the people upholding them. With this mass exodus, we're seeing the checks bounce. The administration's response will likely involve doubling down. Expect announcements of emergency measures to fill the gaps, perhaps invoking national security to bypass norms. This could include militarizing enforcement, using agencies like Homeland Security to pick up the slack. But soldiers aren't trained in due process. Their involvement risks escalating conflicts and eroding civil liberties further. Imagine federal agents, unbound by prosecutorial oversight, raiding homes based on political affiliations. That's not law enforcement. That's oppression. Economically, this vacuum creates opportunities for fraudsters. With fewer eyes on financial crimes, Ponzi schemes, insider trading, and money laundering could proliferate. The SEC and other regulators rely on DOJ support for prosecutions. Without it, enforcement grinds to a halt. Your investments become riskier, and the overall trust in markets diminishes. We've seen this in countries like Russia, where oligarchs thrive while ordinary citizens suffer. Is that the model we're adopting? On the international front, this weakens America's soft power. Allies question our commitment to democracy, potentially fracturing alliances like NATO. Adversaries, meanwhile, celebrate seeing a distracted superpower ripe for exploitation. Trade negotiations suffer as partners demand concessions to offset the instability. Your exports, whether farm goods or tech, face barriers, hurting local economies. But amid the doom, there's potential for renewal. This crisis could galvanize opposition. Congress might finally act, passing reforms to strengthen civil service protections or limit executive overreach. Public outcry could force confirmations of independent appointees. Grassroots movements already mobilizing might push for systemic change. The resigned lawyers could form advocacy groups, providing expertise to counter the regime's narratives. We must also consider the psychological toll on society. When justice seems arbitrary, cynicism spreads. Voter apathy increases, allowing extremists to consolidate power. Mental health suffers as people feel powerless. But history shows resilience. Movements like the civil rights era emerged from similar despair. Perhaps this is our moment to rebuild stronger. Shifting focus to the enablers, key figures include legal advisors from groups like the Federalist Society, who've long advocated for expansive executive power. Names like John Yoo, architect of post-9/11 policies, or current White House counsel who drafted the order. These individuals provide the intellectual cover. Their think tanks, funded by billionaire donors, have groomed a generation of lawyers ready to step in. This network isn't accidental. It's a deliberate strategy to reshape government. Corporate backers play a role too. CEOs from industries chafing under regulations, fossil fuels, big pharma, see this as deregulation by default. Their lobbying dollars fuel the machine, expecting returns and lax enforcement. When the DOJ ignores environmental violations, profits soar, but at the cost of public health and climate stability. The media ecosystem amplifies this. Outlets like Fox News and online influencers frame the narrative, labeling resignees as traitors. This echo chamber desensitizes the public, making extreme actions seem normal. Social media algorithms prioritizing engagement over truth spread misinformation rapidly. Law enforcement unions and local police, some aligned with the administration, might fill enforcement gaps, blurring lines between federal and state powers. This could lead to uneven justice, where red states enforce draconian measures while blue states resist, fracturing national unity. Judges, too, are pivotal. If courts uphold the administration's moves, the slide accelerates. But if they rule against, it could halt the momentum. Recent Supreme Court decisions expanding presidential immunity set a dangerous precedent, emboldening this behavior. For everyday citizens, practical steps include supporting independent journalism, contacting representatives, and joining civic organizations. Education on civics becomes crucial. Understanding how government works empowers resistance. Economically, diversify investments to hedge against instability. Support local businesses less tied to federal whims. Community mutual aid networks can provide buffers against systemic failures. As we approach the endgame, remember this isn't inevitable. The resignation exposed the rot. Now it's on us to excise it. The next days will see attempts to normalize this. Don't let them. Demand transparency, accountability, and restoration of norms. The purge's architects celebrate, but they've underestimated the backlash. Public servants and other agencies watch closely. If they follow suit, the government grinds to a halt. This could force negotiations or impeachment. Internationally, watch for sanctions or condemnations from allies pressuring change. Domestic protests, if peaceful and widespread, can shift the tide. Ultimately, this is a battle for America's soul. Will we reclaim the rule of law or succumb to authoritarianism? The resigned lawyers lit the fuse, now we carry the torch. In wrapping this up, let's project forward. If the loyalists solidify control, expect targeted prosecutions against dissenters, journalists, activists, even rival politicians. This chills free speech as self-censorship becomes survival. The economy contracts as talent flees to stable nations, brain drain exacerbating inequality. Conversely, if resistance prevails, reforms could include codifying DOJ independence, limiting acting appointments, and enhancing whistleblower protections. This strengthens democracy long-term. The role of technology can't be ignored. Surveillance tools wielded by a biased DOJ could monitor opponents, eroding privacy. Cyber attacks on critics might increase, justified as national security. Education suffers too. If investigations target teachers or unions, curricula bend to ideology, producing compliant citizens over critical thinkers. Healthcare implications. Without enforcement, drug companies hike prices unchecked, and fraud in Medicare spikes, straining systems. Energy sector. Deregulation leads to accidents like spills or blackouts with no accountability. Transportation. Safety lapses in aviation or rail go unpunished, risking lives. These aren't isolated. They interconnect, compounding crises, but hope lies in federalism. States' attorneys general can fill gaps pursuing cases federally abandoned. Blue states might form coalitions for collective enforcement. Civil society, NGO, bar associations can litigate against abuses, buying time. The military stance is crucial. If they refuse unlawful orders, it bolsters resistance. Public opinion polls will sway outcomes. If approval plummets, even loyalists waver. Economic boycotts against complicit corporations can pressure change. Internationally, emulate models like post-apartheid South Africa, where truth commissions healed divisions. Domestically, invoke the spirit of founding fathers who designed checks against tyranny. The resigned lawyers' stories humanize the struggle. Share them to inspire. Finally, this moment demands action. Vote, organize, speak out. Democracy isn't spectator sport, it's participatory. The DOJ's emptiness symbolizes a crossroads. Choose wisely, for the ripples affect generations. In conclusion, this script rewrite segments the original into 5 cohesive parts, each building on the last, emphasizing the crisis's depth, mechanics, implications, enablers, and paths forward. The narrative maintains urgency while expanding on economic, social, and historical angles for comprehensive analysis.